Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to start by framing this a little bit. We currently live in a linear economy where we extract our materials, we make something out of them, and we dispose of them at the end of life. Every year, more than 100 billion tons of raw materials globally are transformed into new products, and only about 8.6% of the planet's materials and resources that we use for these products are cycled back into the economy at the end of their use. 2/3 of these materials end up dispersed into the environment as unrecoverable waste or pollution, garbage into landfills, plastics into the oceans, carbon dioxide, which is the waste product of burning fossil fuels, into the atmosphere. The circular economy out of the Netherlands calls this the circularity gap. And really, this linear economy puts an enormous amount of pressure on our planet and our natural ecosystems and exacerbates many of the social inequalities we see today. The linear economy also puts enormous lost economic opportunities across the board from failing to recapture the value of these material resources. In fact, globally, about 1/3 of all food, for example, is wasted at an annual value of nearly $1 trillion US. Here in Canada, that's about 49 billion alone. In the United States, they've estimated that $10 billion per year worth of materials enter the landfills across the country. What this current linear economy is doing is steering us towards a climate change disaster, about 3 to 6 degree temperature increase. And if we continue with this business as usual, we'll be emitting 65 billion tons of greenhouse gas emissions globally by 2030, when we really need to be heading towards net zero, and very quickly. My argument is the circular economy model has really come to the forefront as a solution for moving away from today's linear society and for addressing the growing environmental and social issues and risks. The circular economy model provides actionable business strategies to address the current resource pressures and a way to achieve deeper greenhouse gas emission reductions. So the term circular economy may be relatively new in North America, but the underlying concepts have been around for decades and are based on principles including sustainable development, industrial ecology, design for environment, cradle-to-cradle thinking, and many others. It's actually underpinned by 3 key principles. Rethink, so reducing resource consumption and designing out waste, harmful chemicals, and pollution from our products and services. Secondly, it's about optimizing, so keeping products and components at their highest value and in use for as long as possible while minimizing material losses. And thirdly, regenerate, so preserving our ecosystems and regenerating natural capital. The circular economy sees material flows as being part of 2 distinct cycles, which is important to think about, both biological and technical loops. So biological loops are about ensuring that organic materials and biomass return to the biosphere after use. So food waste and wood products used in construction as 2 examples. Technical loops, on the other hand, which include a focus on inorganic materials like metals and minerals, are about keeping these materials in closed loops to ensure they can be recycled and can be reused again and again, similar to the diagram here. So the circular economy, it's important to think about it in terms of bending our economic activities back into harmony with nature so that growth does not result in environmental degradation. It's about prosperity in a world of finite resources, essentially. It's very exciting in my mind because the prospect of the circular economy brings new economic opportunities by helping to recapture some of the value of the materials and the resources that are currently being lost or wasted. Accenture, for example, suggests that the circular economy could generate 4.5 trillion US of additional economic output globally by 2030 and 25 trillion by 2050. The World Economic Forum states that the circular economy business models provide a competitive edge because they create more value from each unit of resource than the traditional linear take, make, and dispose model. In the context of circular economy, we can think about waste in 4 different ways or forms. Wasted resources. So that's where we are using materials and energy that cannot be continually regenerated. The second area is wasted assets, where products and assets sit underutilized. For example, cars that are parked 80% of the day, or buildings that sit empty. The third area is wasted life cycles, where we have the premature end of use of products given the lack of repair or maintenance or reuse. And lastly, wasted embedded value, where materials, components, and energy from products and materials are not recovered at the end of their use. So the circular economy is really less about waste management as much as it's about designing out the concept of waste altogether from our products and services. There's 5 fairly well-established circular business models or strategies that look to capture the full value of our resources and eliminate this concept of waste across the value chain. The first one is circular supply chains. Next is sharing platforms. Third is product as a service. Fourth is product life extension. And fifth is resource recovery. And I'll just give you a few examples of each of these. So circular inputs into supply chain. It's a business model which uses renewable energy or bio-based or potentially completely recyclable materials as a key input. This is an example here of Chop Value, which is based in Vancouver, and they recover used chopsticks and turn them into products such as furniture and other consumer goods. Here's another one on a totally different scale. This is a mass timber building that's using wood as a circular input. It's going to be about 40 stories tall. It's been designed by Perkins and Will, the Canada Earth Tower it's called, and it's a mixed-use development that's being put up in Vancouver that will become the world's tallest hybrid wood tower, dramatically reducing the project's greenhouse gas emissions as well through carbon sequestration. The structure is going to be made out of cross-laminated timber and will accommodate about 200 residential units. Also really important, kind of the circular principles behind it beyond timber is the project will be a zero emissions building, not consuming any fossil fuels in its operation. The next business model, sharing platforms, involves increasing the usage rate of assets through collaborative models for sharing and community access. So this example here is the Toronto Tool Library, where members can access everything from drills to welding equipment and a whole range of other products and tools in between. The growth of this business model, which many will recognize brands here, in recent years has been largely enabled by digital technology platforms and includes a plethora of examples from shared mobility to accommodation and workspaces to trading platforms, material exchanges, and other types of services. The third business model, product as a service, is a business model where a product's ownership is retained by the producer over the long term to increase its productivity. The Loop is an example here that's now rolling out in Canada in partnership with Loblaws, where they are leasing their reusable packaging to food manufacturers such as Haagen-Dazs, where that gets returned afterwards by consumers and reused again and again. There's many other examples of product as a service business models, including ones that are a little bit more unusual, or unusual suspects, I should say. An example includes H&M's clothing rental service, where they claim customers can own the moment rather than the outfit. So it's rethinking the whole ownership model. The fourth business model is product life extension, which is a business model focused on extending the lifetime of products through repair or reprocessing or upgrading or resale. This image here is the Retuna Mall in Sweden, which is an example where everything in this mall that's being sold is secondhand or refurbished. And they even run repair clinics and maker spaces in the mall. Very cool model. Some may have seen that the EU just brought forward new right to repair legislation rules, which mean that certain electrical goods and appliances sold in Europe now need to be repairable for at least 10 years. And that manufacturers and retailers must make the spare parts available for that period of time. So Europe is a bit further ahead in some of these spaces. The business model that I'll wrap up with in this space is the resource recovery model, which is about recovery of usable resources at the end of a product's life. So one example here is the largest yet most efficient paper mill in Europe, which is run by Smurfit Kappa in the Netherlands. The mill produces about 1 kilogram of solid waste for every ton of paper that it produces, compared to 32 kilograms for its paper competitors. The mill is really exemplifying the concept of industrial symbiosis, where waste from one industry or company becomes a resource for another. So it's using no virgin wood fiber in the production of its paper, believe it or not, relying more on recovered paper and also innovative byproducts from nearby farmers, for example, tomato stems, potato starch, calcium carbonate for the paper product process. And they're also able to recover impurities from their industrial processes and sell those to other nearby industries to generate new revenues and save on their landfill tipping fees. Another example from here in Canada, people may have watched Adam Corneille's pitch to the Dragon's Den panel, which resulted in a full sweep for his resource recovery business model, which earned his company Unbuilders about $500,000 from the investors. Unbuilders is focused on deconstructing homes in order to salvage the really valuable old growth lumber from homes that are 1930s and older in some cases, instead of demolishing those homes and sending all those valuable resources and materials to landfill. So the investors saw an opportunity in this. So the benefits of the circular economy are evolving in terms of the people's understanding, in terms of the application, and as governments and companies and communities at large sort of begin to apply these different models, the benefits have become better understood. In addition to some of the economic and employment opportunities, it can really help to create more resilient communities and businesses and supply chains, as well as spur innovation because of the systems thinking and collaboration that goes on. The circular economy model, as I mentioned earlier, can also help to tackle deep greenhouse gas emission reductions. So while reducing greenhouse gas emissions through energy efficiency and zero carbon renewable energy supply is part of this, and certainly part of powering the circular economy model, the circular economy goes further by also focusing on the production and consumption of energy to get at the 45% of global greenhouse gas emissions that come from how products are manufactured and how they're used. They've estimated that globally, that about 2/3 of greenhouse gas emissions are released during the extraction or the processing and the manufacturing of goods, and that applying circular economy strategies in just 5 areas, cement, aluminum, steel, plastics, and food, could reduce our global emissions by about 40% in 2050. In addition, the circular economy model can help to tackle significant greenhouse gas emissions that come from land use changes and non-energy industrial activities. We're just starting in Canada to examine and better understand the benefits at a more local level. A recent report that was published earlier this year by the National Zero Waste Council confirmed the potential for some significant economic opportunities for Canada, as well as broader social, economic, and environmental benefits for firms and governments and individuals. The study had a closer look at 6 sectors at a fairly high level, and then 15 interventions more specifically. And we're able to determine, or estimate, I should say, a cumulative impact from these interventions of generating approximately 41 billion in additional revenues and cost savings, creating an additional 20,000 jobs, avoiding about nearly 5 million tons of waste, including over 1 million tons of plastic waste, and reducing 5 million tons of avoided greenhouse gas emissions. And that was just from very specific interventions in those 6 sectors. So the global transformation to circular economy has begun, and it's happening across all sectors of the economy right now, from natural resource and extractive industries to manufacturing and construction to more service-based sectors. It also spans the breadth of the private sector, from established multinational firms like some of the brands you see here to innovative startups and small business entrepreneurs. Companies are really beginning, I would say, to reject this idea of take, make, and waste approach to capture new value and attract new customers, also enhance their competitiveness and increase their profitability, and realize some of the additional benefits from the circular economy business strategies I was mentioning earlier. And some are actually finding ways to put those business models or strategies together for increased value. So groups like the Platform for Accelerating the Circular Economy that's led by the World Economic Forum and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation have been supporting this global transition, but there's many others. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation's network of corporate partners and nonprofit and government members now numbers in the thousands and includes some of the recognized global companies here like Google, Walmart, IKEA, Philips, Unilever, Apple, BlackRock. And it's fair to say that governments and the finance sector are also beginning to respond. In Europe, the European Green Deal has embraced the Circular Economy Action Plan, and in terms of investment in research and innovation, the European Commission's Horizon 2020 program has been investing nearly €1 billion per year into research, innovation, and financing of circular projects and initiatives with an aim to help their companies and other organizations become global leaders in technology and business model innovation. It's also finding some major sort of collaboration between the national banks and institutions in Europe that are investing at least 10 billion into the circular economy by 2023. And it's not just in Europe. In China, under the law to promote the circular economy, the government has invested about 470 billion US to complete circular economy transition for its industrial parks. There's also been a number of private market funds that are now focused on circular economy, grown about 10 times in this space since 2016. And here in Canada, the City of Montreal just launched a new $30 million circular economy investment fund. So what's happening in Canada at the moment? And the good news is that there is lots of momentum building from grassroots up to major clusters of activities across key sectors, but we've got a long way to go, obviously, to get from being less than 10% circular today. I think it's important to keep in mind, though, we're not starting from scratch, and it'll be important to build on our strengths and the existing assets that we have wherever possible. So just to touch on those briefly, our industrial base, with some natural resource strengths, obviously, the base varies across Canada. We have manufacturing, we have the technology sector, we have natural resource industries as major economic drivers in many regions. The scarcity of resources is less likely to be the primary motivation for the circular economy in Canada. Instead, we see innovation in areas like the bioeconomy or mineral metals recycling or secondary manufacturing and remanufacturing presenting some of the largest growth potential. Secondly, Canada's relatively low population density and wide geography creates unique challenges in terms of the cost of doing business and the investments needed to support the required infrastructure and the service delivery models of the circular economy. As a result, I'd say Canada sees an inconsistent and often insufficient level of infrastructure required to support the circular economy. However, I think it's fair to say that some of these infrastructure gaps can allow provinces or territories to leapfrog that traditional waste management system and focus more on the upstream components of material flows in areas like product redesign or reuse or repair or remanufacturing and enhanced recycling. I would say despite the mindset focused on consumerism, which is relatively high levels of consumption and waste generation here in Canada, we still have a strong foundation for accelerating an inclusive circular economy by building on some of our diverse cultures, which bring innovation in that sense. And the innovation ecosystem in Canada more generally is quite well advanced with corporate leadership on key issues and applied research in areas like synthetic biology or material innovation or digital platforms and other areas. And lastly, the political landscape and governance structures, as well as some of the jurisdictional controls across Canada, are quite varied and complex. So while policy leadership on circular economy is growing at all levels of government, we need to do more in terms of ensuring alignment and harmonization across the country. So touch on the 4 key drivers that have been highlighted as sort of critical to addressing and supporting the transition to a more circular economy. The first is partnerships. So we need to come together to address the siloed nature of our economy and really embrace more cross-sector collaboration and systems thinking. That involves addressing the current lack of awareness around what the circular economy opportunities are and how to grow the market demand for circular products and services using education and other approaches. We need to address the underlying data and information gaps by creating more robust metrics and better indicators for tracking the transition to a circular economy. Secondly, policy. So we need better harmonized policy efforts and use policy to drive circular economy, including through regulatory approaches, but also new incentives and other economic instruments. And we can learn a lot from what's happened in the clean tech sector or from other jurisdictions that are leaders in the space. We can also leverage our collective purchasing power through procurement as a driver. Third, innovation. So we need to address the current innovation gap as it relates to the circular economy in Canada by investing not only in technology innovation, but also system and process and organizational and product design and business model and supply chain and social innovation. So thinking about innovation in the broadest sense. And lastly, we need to ensure that we're investing effectively in the circular economy through both the appropriate financing mechanisms and funding models, but also addressing the key infrastructure gaps in areas that include recycling and organics processing and remanufacturing infrastructure and reuse and repair facilities, even information communication technologies so that we can leverage digital solutions to look at replacing material assets, for example, renewable energy and low carbon transportation infrastructure. So it's important not to think of circular economy as something outside of the climate change agenda. They're extremely interlinked. And in fact, as I said, circular economy can help us go deeper. So all the efforts in low carbon still are relevant here. And lastly, sort of green infrastructure and nature-based solutions to get to that third principle of regenerating natural capital. Just wrapping up in terms of my role as managing director of the Circular Economy Leadership Canada, I'm currently focused on expanding the network and really driving efforts to amplify some of the leading edge work that's already underway in this space and helping to support innovation and synergies between business leaders and policymakers and academics and other stakeholders to try and drive some meaningful systems change. So the CELC, which was formerly the Circular Economy Leadership Coalition, was launched in 2018 as a network of leaders from all different industries and sectors, and is looking to foster collaboration and innovation, as well as knowledge exchange to really accelerate that transition to a circular economy in Canada. Some of our initial members, you can see on the slide here, a combination of nonprofit and research and academic think tanks, a handful of corporate leaders, some of the clusters like Metal Tech Alley and Our Food Future out of Guelph, Wellington. Back in February, CELC launched the Canada Plastics Pact, which is bringing together more than 60 companies and other organizations across the whole plastics value chain to really focus on eliminating plastics pollution in Canada. And the CPP follows a framework of 4 key targets by 2025 that are in line with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's New Plastics Economy work and some of the other global pacts, including those out of Europe and the United States. So looking for that harmonization approach across supply chains. CELC also launched the Circular Economy Solutions series last fall, which is building out 6 work streams focused on key sectors of the economy and bringing together key stakeholders across North America and Canada more specifically, and including areas like supply chain innovation, circular plastics, mining and metals, food systems, the built environment and construction, and business leadership. And we'll be hosting a workshop on the sidelines of this conference on June 10th in collaboration with Metal Tech Alley and the Material Efficiency Research Group on the strategic role of data in advancing more circular economy for metals using the automotive supply chain as a case study. So hope people can join us for that. Lastly, CELC is supporting the Government of Canada and the Finnish Innovation Fund Sitra as one of 2 Canadian partners in the planning for the World Circular Economy Forum that's being hosted by Canada this September 13th to 15th, a virtual event that's expected to bring together about 4,000 participants from potentially 200 countries focused on circular economy game changer and related solutions. So in summary, there is a huge opportunity for Canada to really rethink how our resources are being used and recaptured, how our products are designed and repaired, and how new services are leveraged to support a resilient low carbon economy. It's really important to note that a circular economy for Canada does not look to close doors on trade or resource extraction, but rather it allows us to capture more value from our natural resources, materials, and our products and services. It's important that the barriers that exist have to be addressed in order to accelerate the transition to a circular economy. And we have to consider the key drivers and enablers I mentioned earlier, not in silos, but rather as interconnected as part of a system. We also need to consider the circular economy from multiple contexts, so urban and rural, recognizing our various cultures and diversity of peoples, as well as the unique strengths and characteristics of the current Canadian economy. And lastly, collaboration is key. And I think the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us that innovation and collaboration are really essential for addressing global crises, and that the transformation, when we put our minds to it, can happen very rapidly. But it does, and obviously putting our minds to it in a way that's coordinated can really bring new opportunities to support the Building Back Better agenda. Thank you very much. Look forward to your questions.